Yeah, you know the tagline, diamonds are a girl's best friend, haha, clever title pun. Now let's get on to the introductions. So at this point, I'm assuming many of you have heard of Lily Orchard, formerly known as Lily Pete. If you haven't, she was a YouTuber who grew popular around the Brony community, and tends to make videos revolving around animation, video games, or whatever she feels like talking about. One of her more recent videos was her rant on Steven Universe, and while that video has garnered some infamy, that's not the video I'm covering today. An animation YouTuber called My Life with Lucario decided to make a response to Lily's video, and I had a fair amount of issues with it. Now before I get started, I'm going to be skipping the first 28 seconds of the video since he just points out how Lily's title for her rants is similar to H.H. Bomber Guy's. And I don't really have anything to say there.
The title didn't particularly bother me, but what did was the points Lily made. They seem to have been at least heavily influenced from other YouTubers. Meanwhile, RoboBuddies also created a fantastic video on Steven Universe from the perspective of being an actual animator herself and analyzing the show's flaws and troubled production in depth, and yet she still hasn't really received the support she deserves for her work. Work that Lily, at the very least, was heavily inspired by with much of her writing.
Now, I'd like you to keep this segment in mind, particularly how he's referring to Lily's points here, since that'll be relevant in a bit.
Essentially, this arc is supposed to be about how there is a gigantic forced fusion incubating inside the Earth's crust that could awaken and destroy the entire world at any moment. Allow me to repeat. It could destroy the entire world!
In the Luckster arc, a massive artificial fusion comprised of millions of gem shards, by the way, remember this is going to be important later, is discovered to be baking beneath the Earth's crust and will soon form and destroy the entire planet. I repeat, it will soon destroy the entire fucking planet.
It's gotten to the point that if the show wants to have an episode even slightly unique and focus on someone else, they still have to shove Steven into the background, despite the fact that the episode would work just as fine, if not better, without him taking up screen time.
Looks like Rose, and also Steven is there. He's been shoved into the episode just because the show has mandated that he always be here, despite the fact that the episode would work just as well, if not better, if he wasn't hogging screen time.
Look at some fan favorites from other cartoons. Band Geeks, Root Beer Float Guy, Tales of Ba Sing Se. These episodes are so popular because they take a break from the usual protagonist and show other things happening in the world, expanding the universe and giving us a fun adventure we wouldn't have gotten from our usual main character.
Avatar has a ton of moments where the perspective shifts to Zuko and Iroh as early as the first episode, and even episodes where Aang isn't present at all. Fan favorite episodes like Zuko Alone, Tales of Ba Sing Se, The Boiling Rock, The Southern Raiders, and 3/4 of Sozin's Comet wouldn't have happened if the series lashed itself to Aang the way Steven Universe lashed itself to Steven.
I'm sorry for letting that clip drag out for so long, but I needed to show all three of Lucario's examples so I could make a point. So, Lucario, can I ask a question? Are you trying to say that Lily plagiarized RoboBuddies? Because if you are, then I agree. Since in your first two examples, Lily's wording and sentence structure is too similar to be seen as a coincidence. And that gives the impression that Lily directly copied what RoboBuddy said and just changed the words around a bit.
Allow me to repeat. It could destroy the entire world!
I repeat, it will soon destroy the entire fucking planet.
Despite the fact that the episode would work just as fine, if not better, without him taking up screen time.
Despite the fact that the episode would work just as well, if not better, if he wasn't hogging screen time.
However, while your first two examples do show some possible plagiarism on Lily's part, your third example is very weak. Firstly, because of how the wording and sentence structure of Lily's argument is very different from RoboBuddies, as you can see in the text here. Secondly, there are some key differences in their arguments that you seem to be glancing over, such as how RoboBuddies is using examples from a variety of cartoons to prove her point, while Lily is just focusing on a handful of episodes from Avatar: The Last Airbender. The only real similarities between their arguments is that they both use Tales of Ba Sing Se as an example to prove how focusing on different characters can make a show's cast and world building feel more alive. It certainly doesn't help that you don't really explain how this is plagiarism, you just say that the points are similar and leave it at that. Now, yeah, I get that if two statements have the exact same wording or an extremely similar variation, you can essentially just show them side by side and let the audience fill in the gaps for you. However, in your third example, the wording and sentence structure isn't that similar, so an explanation is going to be needed as to how that's plagiarism.
Oh, big deal. So what if his three examples don't hold water? Does this really matter?
Actually, yes, because if you listen to the way that Lucario says how Lily's points were inspired by RoboBuddies, then his wording makes it come off like he's saying that this is plagiarism due to how the arguments themselves are similar. Just because two people are making the same basic argument, that doesn't inherently mean it's plagiarism. It can be. If a person gets information from someone, rephrases the argument in their own words, and fails to cite the source they got it from, then that can be considered plagiarism. Because even if it's worded differently, they're still taking someone's idea and making it look like that they're the one that came up with it. That being said, while it may be possible that Lily saw RoboBuddy's video and decided to paraphrase Robo's argument in her own words, it's also possible that Lily already had a problem with the Steven-only perspective before RoboBuddies made her video, and just wanted to use examples from Avatar: The Last Airbender to show how integral it was to give more screen time to other characters. After all, it's not like RoboBuddies was the only person who had this complaint. I found 2 Reddit threads that predate RoboBuddies' video that criticize how the show is mostly shown through Steven's perspective, and even bring up examples of other shows that benefit from shifting the focus to other characters. So did RoboBuddies plagiarize any of these Reddit posts, or did she just already have a problem with the amount of screen time Steven got? Don't know, it could be either, but my point here is it's not really fair to implicate someone for plagiarism just because the arguments are similar if there's no way to prove that the alleged plagiarist might have gotten the idea from someone else. Now, if you wanted to argue how your third example could possibly show plagiarism on Lily's part, you could have brought up how your previous 2 examples show Lily's points looking like closely paraphrased versions of RoboBuddy's arguments. Which makes it more likely that Lily got the idea from RoboBuddy, since if you look at the 3 examples as a whole, then the similarities look more like a pattern than a coincidence. But that's not what you do here, you just say that the points are similar, show some clips, and move on.
And of course, Lily's channel also has likes and comments disabled, as well as a subscriber count disabled. Right out of the gate, any YouTuber that is trying to take their career seriously shouldn't do this. It shows an inability to take criticism, and an attempt to make your viewers believe you're more popular or beloved than you are.
Hold on, her channel has comments disabled? Yeah, I know she's done this with some of her videos in the past, but this isn't something that she consistently does throughout her channel. Heck, you can go to Lily's Steven Universe rant right now and see that the comment section is still viewable. Were you trying to say that she moderates comments by any chance, since that would fit into your point about how it makes a YouTuber look better than they actually are? But if that is what you're saying, then you don't show proof of this, and even then, that doesn't change how your wording is incorrect at best and misleading at worst.
So without any further distractions, let's get into my problems with the video.
The first hiatus lasted for 41 days and started with the episode Bubble Buddies, the 7th episode of the series. The show had just started and was already banging break. The second lasted 3 days. This
goes on for a while. I don't particularly understand how this is relevant to the discussion. One could have simply made the point that the reason Steven Universe is so inconsistent is because of the lack of effort and procrastination on the part of the writers, animators, and storyboarders. And in fact, the show is frequently the subject of hiatuses and breaks. But instead, Lily goes into excruciatingly long detail on these hiatuses, instead of actually explaining what they mean.
Okay, there are 2 big problems with this statement. First off, it seems like you're missing the point as to why Lily went into this much detail in the first place. She wanted to emphasize just how long the hiatuses were so that the audience would get a better understanding on why this was an issue. It's one thing to say, oh, the hiatuses were very frequent and long, and another to actually show the dates where the hiatuses took place. Because not only is she bringing up facts to help back up her statement so that the audience won't just take her at her word, but it gives people who may not have been paying attention to Steven Universe until now a good idea on how long the hiatuses took. Now, was this tangent overly long? Well, Lily's hiatus tangent lasted for a little under 2 minutes, and your examples of Lily plagiarizing RoboBuddies was around the same length. So if we're going to play by that logic, then I could complain about the length of your examples, especially since you viewed the plagiarism as a minor complaint on your part, but I'm not going to because I understand how that length was necessary. I get that when you're calling out plagiarism, multiple examples are necessary, since just showing one could come off as cherry-picking small parts of the videos, that could just be a coincidence. A lengthy tangent isn't inherently a bad thing, as long as the information provided has some substance to it. Now, if Lily just brought up the dates for the hiatuses and didn't elaborate on why they were a bad thing, then that would be a problem with her video. But here's the thing. She did elaborate on why the hiatuses were a problem.
But here's where the biggest problem lies. If you binge watch the series now, everything seems fine. The filler episode's biggest problem in retrospect is just that they're boring, and most people would rather be told the cool story about space battles, not the boring story about some loudmouth brat who doesn't have any earlobes. But when you put it into the context of people waiting 6 months after leaving that kid on a hostile alien planet, only to come back and not even bother giving it a passing glance for multiple weeks, people are going to get angry, because you're just jerking them around and wasting their goddamn time.
Here's where my second problem comes in. The way you framed this point made it look like Lily was just listing off the dates and didn't explain why they were a problem. I get what you were trying to say here. Lily should have just gotten to the point quicker, but the instead of actually explaining what they mean part of your statement gives off the implication that she didn't elaborate at all, which is another case of poor wording that can mislead your audience.
The video is filled with moments like this, including an extended and unnecessary tirade on Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, which goes on for minutes on end.
Are you going to explain why Lily's Old Republic tangent was unnecessary? Are you going to show some clips from parts of the tangent that didn't help her point and could have been cut out? And before you say anything, no, your earlier point against Lily's hiatus tangent isn't an example of how the Star Wars tangent was unnecessary. Because even ignoring how flawed that argument was to begin with, it doesn't prove that Lily's Star Wars tangent was unnecessary. All it proved was that Lily made one allegedly unnecessarily long tangent, and now you expect us to believe that all of her tangents follow the same pattern. So at the end of the day, you're still expecting us to take your word on it. Now don't get me wrong, I do think that parts of Lily's tangent were unnecessary. This part of her tangent, for example, could have been cut out entirely and would have changed nothing, because all she does is show Chancellor Suresh' death and doesn't really tie it into her point about how the Light Sith character doesn't believe in democracy. And it's even more irrelevant when you see that murdering Suresh is seen as a dark side action, even though Lily is supposed to be talking about a Sith who makes light side decisions. But even then, just because parts of the tangent could be cut down, that doesn't mean the entire tangent was irrelevant. Lily went on this tangent so that she could use the Light Sith character as a frame of comparison for how Pink Diamond should have been written. When critiquing how a character is written, it makes sense to make comparisons to other characters that are in a similar archetype. I do agree that her tangent got repetitive, and it certainly could have been cut down, but that doesn't mean the tangent itself was unnecessary.
The video also frequently features Lily responding to strawman arguments she set up using funny voices. Other videos on Steven Universe were so great because they were self-confident. They didn't need to have doubt in themselves and take on strawman arguments. They simply present their opinions in confidence and reasoning, and have so much fun with it, the videos are filled with hilarious moments. They're entertaining. That's what the purpose of a video is, and Lily's videos just aren't entertaining to me.
Oh dear, where to begin? First off, would you care to provide some examples for these strawman arguments? At least with the Star Wars tangent, you were trying to use Lily's hiatus tangent to back up your claim, but here, your audience has nothing but your word to go on. Secondly, I cannot disagree more with your point on how using strawman arguments, or as I'm going to call them counter-arguments, is a flaw with Lily's video. If you were referring to the execution of the arguments, then that would be one thing, but your wording, specifically the they didn't need to have doubt in themselves to take on strawman arguments, implies that you're talking about someone making a counter-argument in general. You do realize that the reason people make counter-arguments in the first place is to make sure that their argument is solid, right? After all, a rant's main purpose is to express one's opinions in the hope that other people will agree with them. This ties into my next point. You say that videos are supposed to be entertaining, and that Lily bringing up strawman arguments isn't entertaining to you. Except that videos aren't just meant to be entertaining. They can be, and I'll give you that Lily was trying to present her arguments in an entertaining way, but that doesn't mean it was the main purpose of her video. Rants, for the most part, are done with the main purpose of informing people of something and persuading the viewers to agree with the ranter. Sure, it doesn't hurt to be entertaining as well, since that can help keep the audience engaged, but as far as rant videos go, that is optional. At the end of the day, a purpose of a rant video is to make an informative and persuasive argument, and counter-arguments are very useful for that, since they can help plug up any holes or loose ends that an argument might have, and would in turn help convince the viewer to agree with the ranter. And finally, you're saying that bringing up strawman arguments is a problem, but didn't RoboBuddies do the same thing in her rant video?
Now, right away, I want to dispel the argument that this was a stylistic choice. Stating that constantly drawing characters wrong is okay because it's a stylistic choice is like saying it's okay to draw your shitty anime characters with weird pant legs and arms constantly behind their backs because it's a stylistic choice. This is the kind of stuff we constantly made fun of Sonic Underground in Core Season 2 for, but here it's okay? No, it's fine, it's just a stylistic choice. It's super cool, it's stylistic, it highlights the imperfections in the world. There's nothing wrong here, it was just the style. They were being experimental this episode, you gotta give them credit for that. But what about Flapjack or Adventure Time? They do the same thing and it's fine there. Well, the reason why it works for these shows is because they're episodic comedies with a heavy emphasis on surrealism, so you can argue changing things around is part of the experience.
A video which you admitted was great? Like, okay, maybe you had a problem with RoboBuddies doing this as well, and Lily just did this more frequently throughout her video, but since you don't bother to mention this at all, then this comes off as giving RoboBuddies a pass for one thing, while criticizing Lily for it. Anyways, he goes on to criticize some of Lily's jokes and statements about gay and non-binary characters, and I don't really feel like getting into that, so I'll just move on to my final thoughts. So, Lucario, as far as I know this is your first response video, and I don't want to discourage you from making another one or anything, but this could have been a lot better to say the least. If you want to do another one of these in the future, I would strongly recommend being more specific with your wording and show more proof of your claims, since those were probably the biggest problems I had with your video. I don't think you were trying to intentionally mislead your audience or anything like that, but the way you worded your sentences often led to points that were either incorrect or gave your audience the wrong idea. And as the video went on, you started showing less proof to back up your claims, which forces your audience to either doubt you or take you at your word, neither of which are outcomes that you want. Anyway, that's all I have to say, and I hope you all enjoyed the video.